In today's world, silence is often misunderstood. People associate silence with emptiness, with doing nothing, or even with weakness. But this is a tragic mistake. Silence is not weakness. It is the foundation of clarity. If you look at your own life, most of your confusion, your anxiety, your stress, all of it arises not from silence, but from noise. And I don't just mean the noise outside, the honking of cars or the chatter of people. I mean the constant mental chatter within you, that inner commentary that never stops, judging, fearing, planning, regretting. It is this noise that clouds your perception, dulls your intelligence, and weakens your ability to see life as it is. Now, when I speak of silence, I do not mean suppressing your thoughts or holding your tongue. I mean something far more powerful. Silence means a certain stillness within you. It means that your mind is not entangled with every little thing that happens around you. It means you have reached a state where you can observe life without immediately reacting to it, and this stillness is not passive. It is intensely alert, fully alive, yet free from distortion. In that silence, your perception sharpens. You see things clearly, not through the lens of your opinions, your emotions, or your past, but as they are. Imagine trying to see your reflection in a pot of water. If the water is constantly shaking, agitated by movement, your reflection will be distorted. You won't be able to see yourself clearly, but if the water is still, suddenly everything becomes visible. This is exactly how your inner state works. If your mind is agitated by the noise of thought, you cannot see reality clearly. Your decisions become reactive. Your emotions dominate your actions. You lose the ability to respond intelligently to life. But when you cultivate silence, you become like that still water, reflecting truth without distortion. This clarity is not something you can get by reading books, collecting information, or quoting great people. It is something you must experience, and for that, silence is essential. In the yogic tradition, we say that the highest form of intelligence is not accumulation, it is perception. You do not become wise by knowing many things. You become wise by seeing clearly what is in front of you, and that requires silence. Only in silence does perception reach its peak. Only in silence does understanding blossom without effort. People often believe that being silent makes you passive or less effective, but look closely. The most effective people are not those who react wildly to everything. They are the ones who respond calmly, with precision. This precision comes from clarity, and clarity comes from silence. It is easy to raise your voice. It takes no strength to shout, but to remain still, to speak only when necessary, to act only when it matters. This requires inner power. This is the strength of silence. If you observe nature, you will see this truth reflected everywhere. A tree does not scream when it grows. A flower does not shout to be noticed. The sun rises in utter silence, and yet its power is unmatched. The most profound forces in existence operate without making noise. Silence is not empty. It is full of potential. It is the cradle from which all creation springs. And when you align yourself with that silence, you align yourself with the very fabric of life. That is strength, not the strength of control, but the strength of knowing, the strength of being rooted. But the challenge is, most people are afraid of silence. The moment there is no noise, they become restless. They immediately want to check their phone, turn on some music, talk to someone. Why is this? Because silence brings them face to face with themselves, and for many, this is an uncomfortable meeting. But if you have the courage to stay, to sit in that silence without running away, something beautiful begins to happen. You begin to see the layers of your own mind. You begin to see how much of your life is shaped by compulsive thought. And in seeing that, you become free. This freedom is not philosophical, it is very real. When your actions are no longer dictated by the constant noise in your head, you gain the ability to choose, and in that choice lies your strength. You are no longer pushed and pulled by every passing emotion. You are no longer enslaved by other people's opinions. You become stable, and in that stability there is immense power. Inner stillness brings mastery over chaos. This is not a poetic statement, it is a fundamental truth of life. Chaos, by its very nature, is not something external, Most people believe that the world outside is chaotic, the traffic, the deadlines, the demands of relationships, the uncertainties of the future. But the real chaos is not outside, it is within. If your inner experience is turbulent, then even a calm day feels like a storm. But if there is stillness within you, even the most turbulent situation outside cannot disturb you. The chaos of the world does not matter as much as the chaos of your own mind. The moment your inner space becomes still, you start to gain mastery, not just over yourself, but over how you respond to life itself. This stillness is not a state of inaction, it is a state of intense presence. When you are still within, it means you are not distracted, your energies are not scattered, your attention is not divided. You are fully here. In that state, your actions become more conscious, more deliberate, more precise. You stop reacting and start responding. Most of what people call living is actually just reacting to life. Someone says something, you react. Something doesn't go your way, you react. It is a constant push and pull, like a leaf blown about in the wind. But inner stillness transforms that. You are no longer the leaf. You become the tree-rooted, unmoved, yet flexible when needed. In every spiritual tradition, whether it is yoga, Zen, or even indigenous practices, stillness has been recognized as the doorway to deeper wisdom. Because in stillness, your perception expands, you are not caught up in your likes and dislikes. You are not driven by impulse. You are not imprisoned by your own mental noise. When this happens, a different dimension of intelligence begins to operate. This intelligence is not based on memory or logic alone. It is intuitive, it is direct. It sees things as they are, and it knows how to act without hesitation or confusion. This is what mastery looks like, not controlling everything around you, but being in such deep control of your inner nature that nothing can shake you. People often misunderstand stillness to be dull or lifeless. But true stillness is dynamic. It is not that you are doing nothing. You are doing what is needed but without agitation. You are moving through life but without friction. You are involved but untouched. This is the quality that every great leader, every wise being, every balanced human being has cultivated. They may be in the middle of a battlefield, a boardroom, a crisis, but something within them remains unshaken. That unshaken quality comes only from stillness. You cannot fake it. You cannot borrow it. You can only cultivate it within yourself. Think about water again. If the surface of a lake is choppy and disturbed, you cannot see what lies beneath. But if the water is still, suddenly the entire depth becomes visible. Similarly, if your mind is constantly disturbed, your own depths are hidden from you. You operate only from the surface, from superficial thoughts and emotions. But when stillness arises, your deeper intelligence becomes accessible. You begin to act from that space of depth, and those actions carry a different quality. They are not based on survival, they are based on awareness. This kind of inner stillness is not about escaping life. It is not about running away to the mountains or sitting in a cave. It is about being in the heart of life, in the marketplace, in your home, in the middle of responsibilities, and yet carrying a certain stillness within you. That is true mastery. Anyone can be peaceful when nothing is happening, but to remain still and centered when life is throwing its challenges at you, that is strength, and that strength is not something that needs to be proven to the world. It is simply there, like a silent presence. Others may not see it, but they will feel it, because stillness has its own vibration. It changes the atmosphere around you. In the yogic sciences, we say that your inner state is your only true possession. Everything else can be taken from you, your name, your wealth, your relationships, but what you cultivate within you no one can touch. Stillness is the highest form of cultivation. It is the space where transformation happens. It is where your reactive patterns break. It is where your compulsions lose their grip. And once you are no longer driven by compulsion, you begin to live consciously. By choice, true power arises when reaction ends. This is something that may sound simple, but it has profound implications on the quality of your life. Most people live in a constant state of reaction. They are not choosing their thoughts, emotions, or actions. They are simply reacting to whatever is happening around them. Someone says something unpleasant, and instantly they react with anger. Something doesn't go their way, and they react with frustration or disappointment. This reactionary way of living means that your life is constantly controlled by external circumstances. In such a state, there is no freedom and certainly no strength, because as long as the world decides how you feel and how you behave, you are not in control of your life. The end of reaction is not the end of emotion or expression. It is the beginning of conscious response. There is a vast difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is compulsive. It comes from a place of unconscious memory. It is driven by past experiences, old wounds, social conditioning. But response arises from awareness. When you respond, you are not driven by your past. You are rooted in the present. There is a pause, a space between stimulus and action. In that space lies your power. Because in that moment, you are free to choose. You are not just a bundle of habits anymore. You become a living intelligence. Look at how most people deal with conflict. The moment someone disagrees with them, they feel the need to defend themselves. They raise their voice. They become tense. They say things they later regret. But where is the strength in that? That is not strength. That is weakness disguised as intensity. Real strength is when you can face any situation, even hostility, without losing your balance. When someone throws anger at you and you don't catch it, you are free. You remain unaffected, not because you are passive, but because you are in command of yourself. This is not suppression. This is mastery. In yogic terms, reaction is seen as karma in motion, old cycles repeating themselves without awareness. The more you react, the more you reinforce those karmic patterns. But when you become silent within, you break that chain. You interrupt the automatic loop of action and reaction, and in that interruption, something new becomes possible. You can now create, not just repeat. You can now live, not just survive. This is why silence and stillness are so highly valued in spiritual traditions, not as an escape from life, but as a way to access the space where transformation becomes possible. Think of a mirror. If it is covered with dust and scratches, it cannot reflect anything clearly. In the same way, when your mind is clouded with reactive emotion, it cannot reflect reality. You don't see things as they are, you see them through the lens of your own agitation, and from this distorted perception, wrong actions follow. But when your mind becomes quiet, like a clean mirror, your perception becomes sharp. You can see the situation clearly, and your response becomes intelligent. This intelligence is not taught in schools. It comes only when you go beyond reaction. People often confuse power with control over others, but true power is control over oneself. If you cannot remain centered when provoked, if you lose your inner balance when faced with challenge, then you are not powerful, you are vulnerable. Anyone can push your buttons and make you act in ways you never intended. This is not freedom, and it is certainly not strength. But the moment you learn to pause, to observe, to choose rather than react, you become a master of your own system. And that mastery brings an unshakable strength. It is not loud, it is not aggressive, but it is unmistakable. This kind of inner strength does not need validation. It does not seek approval. It stands on its own, silent and steady. It is the power of a mountain, unmoved by the passing winds. It does not come from dominance over others, but from deep alignment within oneself. And once you taste that alignment, once you realize that you are no longer a slave to every thought, every feeling, every situation, a great liberation dawns. You stop being a victim of life. You become a creator. Every moment becomes a choice, not a compulsion. You begin to shape your life from the inside out, and that is where true power lies. In silence, the mind becomes a tool, not a tyrant. The mind, by its very design, is a magnificent instrument. It can calculate, imagine, analyze, and remember. But for most people, it has turned into a master, not a servant. It dominates their lives rather than serving them. This is because the mind, when left unchecked, becomes compulsive. It keeps spinning stories, jumping between past and future, constantly interpreting and judging everything. Most of the suffering in human life is not because of what is happening externally, but because of what the mind is doing internally. It creates fear when there is no danger, sorrow when the moment is perfectly fine, and restlessness even in the midst of peace. When silence arises within, the relationship with the mind changes completely. Silence is not just the absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness without thought. In that space, you begin to see the mind for what it is, a collection of thoughts, memories, impressions, and beliefs. You realize that you are not the mind, you are the one who can observe the mind. This simple recognition is incredibly powerful. As long as you are entangled with every thought that arises, you are in its grip. But the moment you become a witness to it, you begin to use the mind rather than be used by it. Think of a knife. In the hands of someone who knows how to use it, it can be a precise and effective tool. But in the hands of someone who has no control over it, it becomes dangerous, even to the one who holds it. The mind is exactly like this. It can be the sharpest instrument for navigating life, but if you don't know how to hold it properly, it turns against you. It becomes a tyrant, constantly chattering, criticizing, fearing, and craving. Most people are tormented by their own thoughts not because life is cruel, but because they have never learned to put the mind down. Silence teaches you that it is possible to put the mind down, not in the sense of destroying it or suppressing it, but in the sense of placing it aside when it is not needed. Just like you don't carry a hammer everywhere unless you are building something, you don't need to keep the mind constantly active unless it is serving a purpose. But for this to happen, you need a certain space within yourself, a gap between you and your mind. Silence creates that gap. It is not something you do. It is something that naturally arises when you stop being involved in every thought that comes. In that space of silence, something amazing begins to happen. The mind starts to quiet down. Thoughts no longer rush in uninvited. You gain the ability to choose your thoughts rather than be overwhelmed by them. You decide when to think, how to think, and even when not to think. The mind becomes more focused, more efficient, and far more powerful when used sparingly and intentionally. It becomes a precise tool instead of a background noise that never stops. When the mind is no longer your master, you become available to life in a new way. You begin to experience moments without labeling them. You begin to listen without the urge to respond. You begin to see without projecting. This purity of perception, unhindered by mental commentary, is what brings depth to life. You start to notice things that were always there but hidden behind the clutter of thoughts. Simple moments become profound, ordinary experiences become rich, life itself becomes more vivid and alive. There is a natural intelligence in you that can only express itself in silence. It does not come from books or teachings, it arises from your being. But for that intelligence to function, the noise must settle. Just like a radio station cannot be heard clearly through static, your inner clarity cannot shine through the static of a noisy mind. Silence removes that static, it clears the frequency. You begin to operate from a place of knowing that is beyond intellect. This does not mean the intellect is useless. It means the intellect must know its place. When the mind becomes a servant, it is brilliant. It solves problems, organizes tasks, creates ideas. But when it tries to run your entire inner world, it becomes exhausting. It leads to anxiety, overthinking, and confusion. Silence restores the balance. It reminds the mind that it is not the source of life. It is just a tool for navigating it. And in this recognition, you reclaim your inner space, your peace, and your clarity. Presence is born where noise ends. Most people believe they are present in their lives simply because they are physically there, but presence is not about your body occupying a space. It is about your attention being fully rooted in the moment. This quality of being absolutely here without drifting into the past or the future, without being distracted by thought or emotion, is a rare and powerful state, and it cannot be achieved through effort alone. It happens naturally when the inner noise subsides. The noise referred to here is not only external, it is the inner commentary that never stops, the mind jumping from one idea to the next, planning, remembering, worrying, judging. This constant stream of thought is what separates you from the present moment. You may be listening to someone, but your mind is already preparing a response. You may be walking in nature, but your mind is thinking about yesterday's conversation or tomorrow's meeting. The body is here, but you are not. This absence of presence is the root of much of our dissatisfaction, confusion, and disconnection in life. Presence is not something you have to acquire. It is your natural state when you are not entangled in mental activity. Watch a child deeply absorbed in play or a bird perched silently, aware of its surroundings. There is no past or future in that moment, just pure being, that is presence. But as we grow, we accumulate layers upon layers of thought patterns, identities, fears, and desires. These create a mental fog that blocks our ability to be present. The only way to dissolve this fog is through silence. Silence is not a forced stillness. It is not about holding the breath or sitting stiffly with a blank mind. It is about relaxing into awareness, letting go of the need to interfere with every moment. When you allow things to be as they are, without the compulsive need to label or interpret, a gentle silence begins to bloom within you. And in that silence, presence arises effortlessly. You are no longer trying to be here. You simply are. Presence is powerful because it aligns you with reality. When you are fully present, you see more clearly, feel more deeply, and respond more wisely. Your perception sharpens, not because you are analyzing more, but because you are filtering less. You are not clouded by assumptions or expectations. You meet life directly, moment by moment, without the baggage of memory or projection. This direct encounter with life brings a sense of aliveness and clarity that is often missing in habitual living. When noise ends and presence begins, your relationships transform. You listen to others not just to reply, but to truly hear them. Your communication becomes more authentic because it arises from a place of awareness rather than reaction. You begin to notice subtleties in expression, shifts in energy, and unspoken emotions. All of this becomes visible only when your inner screen is clear. Noise dulls your sensitivity, presence heightens it. Presence also brings a sense of fulfillment that no external achievement can provide. In presence, even the simplest activity becomes rich. Drinking water, watching the sky, feeling the breeze. It is not the activity that changes, it is the depth of your involvement in it. When you are fully present, every experience is complete in itself. You are not looking to the next moment for happiness. You are not waiting for something better. You are immersed in what is, and that immersion brings contentment. This state of presence cannot be maintained by force. It can only be invited by dissolving what obstructs it. The biggest obstruction is the identification with thought. When you believe every thought that passes through your mind, you are constantly being pulled away from the now. But the moment you see a thought as just a thought, not as truth or self, you begin to disidentify. That disidentification creates space, and in that space, presence naturally reveals itself. Presence does not mean you stop planning or thinking altogether. It means that thinking becomes a conscious activity, not a compulsive one. You think when necessary, and when not needed, you rest in awareness. You do not lose yourself in the movement of the mind. This ability to step in and out of thought is what makes you truly free. You are no longer possessed by the mind, you are anchored in being. Being present does not make life easier in the conventional sense. Challenges will still come, situations will still be unpredictable, but your ability to face them changes dramatically. You are no longer reacting from fear or habit. You are responding from stillness. That stillness, born out of silence, carries a tremendous power. Not the power to control life, but the power to meet it fully. Presence is not a technique. It is not a performance. It is the fragrance of silence. Silence is not emptiness. It is full of intelligence. When people think of silence, they often imagine a void, a nothingness, an absence. But this is a misunderstanding born out of living in a noisy world. Silence is not the lack of something. It is the presence of something far more profound than words, thoughts, or sounds. In silence, there is an intelligence that cannot be understood through logic or expressed through language. It is not the kind of intelligence that you read about in books or acquire through study. It is a knowing that arises from the very core of existence. This intelligence does not speak in sentences. It does not follow the patterns of human speech or reason. It reveals itself in flashes of clarity, in deep intuition, in subtle awareness. When the mind becomes quiet, when the inner noise subsides, you begin to perceive this intelligence. It is not something you need to create. It is always there, like the sun hidden behind the clouds. The moment the clouds part, the light is visible. Similarly, when thoughts lose their grip and the chatter fades, the intelligence of silence begins to shine through. This is the reason why mystics and sages throughout history have turned to silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because what they had realized could not be fully captured in speech. Speech is linear, limited by structure and time. But truth, in its raw form, is boundless. It can only be hinted at through words. To truly know it, one must become silent. Only in silence does that deeper knowing unfold, not in pieces, but as a total vision. You don't think your way into it. You fall into it effortlessly when thought steps aside. When you sit silently and become still, you may begin to notice things that previously escaped your attention. The rhythm of your breath, the subtle movements of your body, the space between sounds, all these begin to speak in a language beyond language. You start sensing more than hearing, feeling more than thinking. There is a whole realm of perception that opens up only when you are not busy interpreting everything, and in that realm a different kind of intelligence operates, one that is inclusive, non-fragmented, and immensely wise. This intelligence is not yours in the sense of possession. It does not belong to the ego or the individual. It is universal. It is life itself knowing through you. The more silent you become, the more this knowing flows. Not in a dramatic or mystical way, but in a grounded, real, and steady manner. You simply begin to act with more clarity, see with more precision, and live with more depth. There is no analysis needed, no endless weighing of options. There is just a quiet certainty, an inner compass that points clearly even in the midst of uncertainty. Most people are too caught up in their mental activity to access this intelligence. They keep asking for answers but are unwilling to listen. Real listening requires silence, not just outwardly but inwardly. If the mind is already full, there is no room for new knowing to enter. But when you empty yourself, when you become receptive, life itself begins to speak. Not always in words, but in presence, in nudges, in a kind of silent guidance that cannot be doubted when it is felt. This is not about disconnecting from the world. In fact, when you touch this silent intelligence, your connection with the world becomes richer. You see things more clearly. You understand people more deeply. You sense the undercurrents of situations without needing explanations. Your actions become more appropriate, not because you planned them, but because they arose from a space that sees the whole picture. This is the wisdom of silence. It does not arrive through study. It blossoms in stillness, even in creativity, whether it is art, music, writing, or problem solving. Silence is the source. Every great creation has come from a moment when the Creator touched something beyond the ordinary mind. That moment of inspiration, that spark, does not come when the mind is cluttered. It comes in the gaps, in the stillness between thoughts, in the spaces where nothing is being forced. That is where the intelligence of silence resides, subtle, invisible, but immensely powerful. Silence is not passive, it is not dull, it is not the absence of engagement, it is the ground from which true engagement becomes possible. Without it, you are merely reacting. With it, you begin to respond with depth. You begin to align with life rather than resist it. This alignment brings a sense of ease and power that does not need to be asserted. It simply is. And it comes not from knowing more, but from being more aware, more present, more empty of noise and full of intelligence that flows naturally when you are quiet enough to receive it.